This is step 3 of the binomial real options pricing model. In this step, we're going to complete the net cash flows section of the model. If you have not completed steps 1 and 2, step 1 is the discounted cash flow model. Step 2 is the data section for the binomial real options model. You need to pause this video and go and complete steps 1 and 2. To complete the net cash flows portion, let's enter our net cash flows as they would play out over time in our model. We're going to use this section ultimately to calculate the probability of our upstate, the binomial value of the model, and then we'll calculate the difference between our net present value from the discounted cash flow models and the binomial model's value of the project. So in time 0, we'll move along this timeline. I've constructed this tree to guide you. In time 0, we have an expense of $1,000. So we'll go ahead, and this is a cash outflow, so we'll make it negative. And we'll go ahead and point to that value. Period 1, we are into our clinical phase, and that has a negative cash flow of $2,000, as does year 2. When we get into year 3, we have our first instance of revenue to offset expense, so we'll take that revenue value and we'll subtract from it the corresponding expense to realize the income for that period. Now, for the remaining periods, we have to calculate the values associated with the market up or the market down states. As we're selling this product, we have a market up state of 300%. We see a pretty good return, and a market down state where we see only 41%. So we need to factor those in now to our revenue forecast as we move forward. In considering period 4, we consider first the upstate position. So we're going to take our revenue and multiply it times our upstate, and this is the first upstate, so we'll raise it to the first upstate power. Then we'll reduce that revenue value by our expense. All right. Now we'll address our first downstate value. We're going to have revenue, but we want to factor in the instance that the market is in a down state. So we'll take our downstate rate, and this is the first period that we experienced that. So we'll raise that to the first, and now let's reduce it by the corresponding expense. Now we'll move to our next period, period 5's upstate forecast. Again, we'll take that revenue, we'll multiply it times the upstate rate. This is our second period of upstate, so we'll factor in that growth, 2. And now let's reduce it by the corresponding expense, $15,000. Now let's handle our downstate. In the same issue, we have our revenue. We have our downstate rate, and we'll raise that to the second period in which we're earning revenue. And we'll reduce that by the corresponding expense. Now, in order to get to here, you would experience one upstate and one downstate. So we need to take our revenue and factor in the first period here of an upstate. Now you can raise this to the first just for consistency, just to make it clear. It doesn't matter, it doesn't change the value to the first power, that's just the same value. And then we have to factor in or multiply in as well the effect of a downstate, because it also took a downstate to get to here. And that was one downstate to get to here. And then we take out our expense. All right. The sixth period upstate, we'll take our revenue and multiply that times the return of our upstate, the upstate rate. And this is now the third upstate period, so we'll raise it to the third power and then take out our cost. Now let's do the downstate. Straightforward, equals our annual income times our downstate rate. We'll raise that to our third downstate and subtract our cost. Now, in order to get here, we will have experienced two upstates and one downstate. So we'll take our revenue equals our revenue, and we'll multiply that times our upstate raised to the second power times our downstate raised to the first power. Just for clarity, we don't really have to do that, but that way it's consistent. And we'll subtract from that then our revenue. Now to get here, you would have experienced two downstates and one upstate. So let's do that. Equals our cost times our upstate raised to the first power. We have one upstate times our downstate raised to the second power. We have two, and we'll subtract then our cost. Finally, we have four upstates to get to here, period 7. Take our revenue and multiply that times the rate raised to the fourth power minus our expense. And let's go ahead and solve for the downstate. It's, again, straightforward, equals our revenue times the down rate raised to the fourth power, the fourth period in which we've experienced that, and we'll subtract our cost. Right. Now, for these, again, we'll just determine how many upstates, how many downstates. For this one, we would have had 3 upstates and 1 downstate to get to here. So I'll take equals revenue times our upstate raised to the third power times our downstate rate raised to the first power minus our expense. Don't forget the expense. To get to here, you would have had 2 upstates and 2 downstates. So we'll go ahead and take our revenue, multiply that times upstate raised to the second power times downstate rate raised to the second power minus our expense. And finally, to arrive here, you would have had experienced 3 downstates and 1 upstate. So we take our revenue, multiply that times upstate raised to the first power times downstate rate raised to the third power minus our expense. This completes the net cash flows portion of our binomial real options pricing exercise.